Okay, so welcome back, and we are looking at our session 5 today, where we will continue the theme that we had taken last time, and that's related to Sankhya, this whole concept of dualism, the dualism model that I discussed last time, and we will take it ahead to some parts of Vaisheshika as well. Vaisheshika basically means analysis of aspects of reality. So, we are kind of going over to the third broad category of Indian philosophy. And we would obviously, we have only 2 points mainly to talk, actually only one. And we would be restricting ourselves to the discussion on, what I have called here as the body of desires or the mind and its effect. So it's a very logical continuation of what we did last time, and we would go from there, right? So I begin with the dual model once again that we presented last time, with just some slight change in terminologies over here. So just to recap, last time I mainly presented on, I presented certain rationality for the existence of, something that is beyond the mechanistic understanding. Right? Please remember. So, world over we have the simple mechanistic understanding, which is that all what you see is what is there, and when what you see is finished, everything is over. That's the simple understanding, which is of course there. Whereas in the Sankhya philosophy, this dualism model, we see that no, there is something that continues to live after everything is finished. That's exactly what we were discussing. Does anybody want to share some reasons, at least from the world of science, that we quoted to substantiate or to give some reasoning as to why there should be something beyond what you see? Yes? Anybody remembers anything that we spoke? Yeah, near-death experience was one thing. Out-of-body experiences, that was kind of allied with it. Reincarnation. Yeah, so we discussed that there are so many thousands of kids in the modern world where psychiatrists have actually seen that these children remember a former life in another setting completely sometimes. And they have so many memories of that particular life that it becomes very difficult to dismiss that evidence as not present. Right? So that was one thing. Anything else that we saw last time? Other than near-death experience, out-of-body experience, and consciousness. We saw something on this mysterious entity called as consciousness. How did we define consciousness? Awareness, okay. Cogito ergo sum, as René Descartes had said. Any other more elaboration on consciousness? Willing, thinking, feeling, willing. I mentioned that as, right? So, if you remember, so I also said towards the end that how this consciousness is something, it's very interesting because we all kind of individually know that we are conscious. Consciousness means, we are aware of our body, our mind, our feelings. That means in some ways, if you kind of carefully think about it, it does seem that we are also, when you say I, that I is kind of a witness to whatever is happening in this body. You understood? So we are seeing, we are like a witness. But at the same time, you cannot look at that I from a separate point of view because you escape along with it. So it's a very mysterious thing. And in the context of consciousness, I also spoke about some brain experiments. Do you recall that? What did they attempt to prove? What did the brain discussions attempt to prove? Yeah, the willing part. Where is it coming from? Remember that? Like, if I have to raise my hand, I can have a signal from here that tells my hand to go up. But the whole question is, where is that will to raise my hand coming from? The decision being made. Scientists are still thinking about it. So please remember this Penfield, whom I spoke about last time, he had done these experiments in 1976, 40 years ago. And his conclusions even today are like that. That means in the last 40 years, nothing has progressed in this domain. So whatever we know at that time, we know that itself now. And that being that parts of the brain control parts of the body. But then what controls the brain or what originates desires is still continues to be unknown. Okay, so those experiments I quoted were from 1976. Long time ago. Okay, so this is what we discussed last time. Yes, everyone remembers? Anybody had any other question on this just before I go ahead to the next topic? Because today's topic is actually a continuation of last time. Did any of you think of anything? Okay, let's go ahead. So maybe if you have something to ask, we can discuss that as well today. Great. So I think last time I did mention this point that in the dual model, as understood in Sankhya, there is the external body and there is this, this unit of consciousness. If you remember, I had defined soul as a single unit of consciousness. The entity that is actually conscious of this particular system. Whereas the gross body I mentioned in terms of elements. So this earth, water, fire, air, ether are all what? Elements. Whereas this mind, intelligence, false ego, please remember we had called it as functions. So these are actually not elements. So the subtle body is considered one in composition, but threefold in functionality. Okay, so it's kind of, so we call this as precipitate body, just like we use this word in chemistry. You know, precipitate as in something that has manifested, something that is external, something that has already come about. Whereas the body of desires, that's what it is called. In Sanskrit, the term is linga sharira. So that means the body of desires. So the body of desires is having three functions: mind, intelligence, and ahankar. And we will be talking about that today. Today's main topic is actually related to this, especially the mind. So I will also present certain ways in which we can understand how we do have a mind. You know, we all use the word mind in English language, and in any language we have an equivalent to the word mind. But please note that in the strict mechanistic model, it is very difficult to show where the mind is. Even today, if you Google or if you try to search, what do many scientists think about the mind? There are different schools of thought. The by and large accepted thought is there is nothing like the mind, because as in, or it is some complex interaction of the brain, but nothing is proved in that direction also. And it is like that since 40 years, since the time of Penfield, where he spoke about those brain experiments. Right? So these are body of desires, and yeah, so as far as the soul is concerned, it only had characteristics. So these are again not elements. So here I am listing elements, here I am listing functions, here I am listing characteristics. Sat as a characteristic means eternality. And eternality basically means time having no influence on that. Always eternality will be a difficult concept for us to digest, since we live in a temporary domain where everything is subject to end. You know, so it's very difficult. But still, in one way you can understand eternality. And that way is by looking at your own consciousness. Because this consciousness which is there, it is the same consciousness that you are having now, which was there 10 years ago, which will be there another 20 years down the line. That means even though the body is constantly changing, that conscious unit is actually the same. And it is not getting affected by time. That's one way you could actually look at it. There are other characteristics of it though. The other is the soul having its own knowledge of whatever it needs to know in order to be happy. So Ananda basically means bliss. So the goal of every living entity, that's why if you remember when we spoke about the purpose of life, we also said that everybody is actually looking for happiness. Everyone is looking for happiness. Because this unit of consciousness, by definition, it is a unit which is full of happiness. But then when it is, so the model that the Sankhya explains is that the soul is currently trapped within this unit of body, and it is trying to do everything through this body in order to, So a simple example could be given, just like somebody is playing a computer game. Let us say somebody is playing a computer game that, what is that famous game? Terminator or something, right? People play generally. I don't know whether they play now also, but at least 5 years back they used to play a lot. So if you take a computer game, there is a computer hardware, correct? A multimedia system on which that game is running. There is the software, which basically dictates all the logic for the game, and there is the person who is playing. Now if you see, when somebody sits in front of the computer and plays a game or does anything like that, the person sitting in front of the computer has his own identity. You understood? He's a separate person. But when he is playing that game on the computer, he has some identification in the computer. Correct? Like when you play a game in the computer, you are somebody in that game, right? Aren't you somebody or no? Like, don't people say, I was killed. I mean, I was killed doesn't literally mean that you were killed. It just means that in that Terminator game, something happened and somebody shot you or you died, so to speak. You understood? So, you forget. So, at that point of time, when you are playing the computer game, you forget everything about your own identity as Mr. and Miss So-and-so. And you completely identify with that character, which is through that computer hardware and software. Correct? And you identify with the joys and sorrows of that character. So if that character in the game wins, you're ecstatic. And when the character is dead, you feel you're dead. Temporarily, you forget about yourself when you're playing the game. Am I right or no? Isn't that in one way the goal of a computer game manufacturer as well? To allow you to be so absorbed in the game that you forget about actually who you are. Okay? Right? And so please remember, those of you who are in computer science or IT, computer engineering or IT, gaming is a very big business. There's a lot of money in it. And also there are a lot of jobs in it. High end. I just spoke to one of my students yesterday. She works with NVIDIA. So she told me that they make various processors which actually facilitate good gaming, and they write various compilers in such a way that the gaming software can run very quickly so that the user gets that kind of an experience. Right? So that's something apart from our philosophy over here. So you understood the point, right? So when you're sitting in front of the game, you forget about yourself and you identify with that game. So the Sankhya philosophy proposes a similar thing happens to every soul when he is occupied in a particular body. He identifies very strongly with that body through the medium of ahankar. So this ahankar enables you, gives you that identification. Like, isn't it true that people have to identify with something to feel happy? Like, for example, if you go for an IPL game, let us say, some Bangalore and Delhi are playing. People go, and outside the venue, they are selling all kinds of t-shirts of either Bangalore or Delhi. And you have to choose actually, literally, which party you are. Yeah, if you're sitting in front of a game and you say that, I don't care whether Bangalore wins or Delhi wins, people will say, why are you seeing? You're mad or something. So you identify, right? You wear the shirt of Bangalore. And hey, Bangalore, shouting. So that's the ahankar, the ego. You understood? You develop an understanding of who you are. Or when you're sitting in front of the game, if you say that, I'm not going to be anybody in the game, then why the hell did you come here? There was no need to sit in front of the computer. You got this point? So the ahankar component is important because without identification, there is no fun. You got to identify yourself with something. Okay, so so just like in a game, you identify with that, with a team or with some character in the computer. Here, you identify with the body. And though this body changes, you have to take a new identification, which is very important. And that is why these children of reincarnation memories, they suffer a lot. Because they have conflicting egos. On one hand, they know that I am so-and-so in this life. But then unfortunately, they also remember who they are of the past. And nobody can handle this kind of conflict. So it's nature's design that generally people start fresh so that you can actually be focused on what you want to do. Okay, so I think I mentioned this last time as well, that it's not fun to remember past lives. It's not something great or exciting. It's a trauma. That's what is reported. Right? Because of conflicting ego. You can't handle two identities. Imagine. How can you handle that? How will you function rationally in the world? Right? So just like in a game, there is a computer hardware. That computer hardware in this context can be compared to what? What could the computer hardware in the game be compared to here? Yes? Which body? The gross body, the precipitate, the externals. Right? When you sit in front of the computer, all you see is the external stuff. Do you see the software? You don't. You only see the external stuff. Whereas the software, the logic for the game, how to play the game, that is basically compared to what? The body of desires. Because this body of desires basically tells you how to use that hardware. Like what's a software actually in computer science? In computer science, the software is nothing but a medium that allows you to interact with the hardware, right? Without software, you cannot interact with the hardware. Correct? Like those of you who are in, again, computer engineering or IT, when you come to third year, you have a course called systems programming, where you will be studying how to write device drivers or various kernel software, where you write stuff to actually control the hardware. Right? You want to print something, so there is a printer. So the printer has to have a device driver. That's what it is technically called. That means a software that connects to that device and runs it. Right? Yeah, makes sense? So that here is being compared to what? The body of desires. And who is actually being compared here to the soul in this example? The person. The person who's sitting in front of the computer is compared to the soul, because that person who is there identifies with all the joys and sorrows of that computer game and forgets his own original identity of who he or she is. And that's precisely what happens. So this is an example just to convey the connection between these three items. Yeah, makes sense? So another point is that the soul itself undergoes by and large three stages of the consciousness itself. If you remember, we have spoken about, consciousness. It has what we call as three states. I hope you are comfortable with this term called as states. So state as in, it's in different states. So one state is the state of waking. Just like, all of us, hopefully we are awake. So that's waking. The second is dreaming. So this basically happens when you sleep. Because when one sleeps, generally one always dreams. And, most of the time it is just that we don't remember a dream. Or sometimes we remember very slightly, hazy, we have a hazy idea of what the dream was. We don't remember exact details. But the thing is, why it is called as a different state is because at that particular point of time, your mind and the body of desires somehow disconnects with your external body. Imagine if you have to be always conscious of your body and understand that you are this, how can you sleep? You have to forget. Sleep means to forget. Right? In some way, you have to forget at that point, right? Only then you actually get sleep. So that's why even sleeping pills which you see, they are unfortunately there sometimes, because a person, generally it is said that if the mind is not very healthy, you cannot sleep at night. Because, if you are agitated, disturbed, you don't get sleep. Because you're constantly thinking about the problems of this body and this particular life. So how can you switch off? So you're unable to switch off your consciousness. So sleep basically means the ability to go from wakefulness to dreaming, where you disconnect with this external interface and imagine another interface in the mind. So the mind starts picturing wherever it wishes to go. And the third is called as comatose condition. This is called as deep sleep. Comatose, like coma. So in Sanskrit, the names used are Jagriti, Swapna and Sushupti. Jagriti means awake, Swapna means dreaming, that is sleeping, and Sushupti means deep sleep or comatose condition. Like a person is in coma, he doesn't even know that he is there, but he is there. The consciousness is switched off, kind of. He's not even dreaming actually, please remember. In a comatose condition, you don't dream. You dream only in a natural sleep. Comatose condition is deep sleep where your consciousness is completely temporarily switched off, not permanently. Temporary. Make sense? Yep. Yeah. So these are three states of consciousness. Three states that consciousness goes through. Your consciousness is jumping back and forth. Yeah, make sense? So with that, we just move ahead to, so basically today's topic, as I said, is mainly about the body of desires. So since I'm coming to that, I will, I'll bring in the purpose why we are talking about body of desires. So why this body of desires is considered important is because the Sankhya model and all the 6 systems of Indian philosophy explain that when the person, the soul, the unit of consciousness has to leave the body, he doesn't leave alone. He comes along with the software. So you take your software from one life to another. So the kind of desires, the kind of inclinations one takes from one life to another life. That's the model that the Indian philosophical systems speak about. Which basically also means that suicide is no solution to any problem in the world. Because it just makes no sense. I mean, just today morning I was just reading, so many people commit suicide in India. It's not a, it's kind of very common. In fact, in many other countries in the world, they use technology also to do that. I was reading once that in Japan, people come on the internet to form suicide pact. I mean, those who want to commit suicide, 4 or 5 of them come together, they sit in a car and they start some gas, inhale it, and they all die together. Just to give courage to each other. Sab saath mein marenge. You know, like of course in Indian Bollywood they say saath mein jiyenge, saath mein marenge, but some people have taken it more seriously. You know, in India only we say some things. We don't, you know, really take it too seriously. Right? So, from the Indian perspective, suicide absolutely makes no sense because you never terminate yourself. Like today morning I was reading, there was this student in Amity School, New Delhi. He's a law student, 3rd year. That guy became YD, so he committed suicide. You know, he lost his ear because the attendance was short and he was detained. 20-year-old boy in Delhi. He just killed himself. He wrote to the principal saying that, hey, I should not lose a year, my career nashto ho jayega. The principal said, kuch nahi chalega. So that fellow, he finished himself off. I don't want to live. So it's a very strange world that we live in where, you know, people make very quick decisions. But from the Sankhya philosophy perspective, dying is never the solution at all because you continue. So what is the use of dying? How does it help you? You have to still fight. You know, that means the fight never stops. You can't run away. That's the whole point. You have to take every problem in life head on. So there's no question of quitting. You know, the concept of I quit does not exist. And that's exactly what you see in the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna as part of the Gita, where Arjuna wishes to quit the battle, saying that I don't want to face the life's problems. Because it's very uncomfortable killing all your friends and your grandfather and teacher and everything. He says, I don't want to fight, I'm quitting. But the whole point is you cannot quit. You have to fight. You have to fight the problems of life. That's the real kind of sense from this. So the theory here is that in the dualism model, the unit of consciousness, when it goes on to the next, so whole question is, how does it get a next body? You know, so when we talk about reincarnation, so we are basically talking about the fact that one gives up one body and takes another one. Right? So the whole question is, how does he get it? So the theory as per Sankhya is that it's based on the desires. So the desires which are there, the body of desires, facilitate your next existence. Okay, so this is explained also because, so basically one thing is that just like we generally understand a body only from an external perspective as what we see. But if you see, there are so many bodies in the world and every body has a mixed bag of desires. You understand what I'm saying? Especially if you consider all the species of life. There are so many species and every species has a unique desire in terms of how it wants to really enjoy life. You understood? So, every species is good at something if you carefully observe nature. Right? Some birds have some particular ability, some animals have some, and even among them there is such a variety really. So the point of the model of evolution here is that human life is considered like a junction. Just like you have a traffic junction where there are 5 roads coming and you come to a junction, you decide where you want to go. So that's the analogy used for a soul in the human form. Because here you have much more freedom than other species, where you decide how you want to orient your body of desires. And depending on how you orient it, you have another body which gets created as per that kind of desires. So this philosophy teaches something very interesting, and that is we are only responsible for our existence. So this is a very underlying theory in all the systems of Indian philosophy. That means whatever body we have got and whatever kind of facilities we have, if you ask the question, who is responsible for this? So the answer is, you are only responsible for it. The reason is, you have had certain types of desires because of which there is a certain facility. See, please remember, the logic behind it is that desires give rise to an external precipitation. You understood? That's why we call this as precipitate body and this as body of desires. Because anything that you desire comes out in the external world. Are you understand what I'm saying? Just like I'll give you a simple example. If you're just even sitting, and I mean, like, you know, sometimes people watch a tragic movie in which there is the death of the hero and heroine. And there are many people who cry also at the end. Or let us say, for example, a more simpler example. You're watching a cricket match between India and Pakistan. God forbid India loses. People cry. I mean, I've seen people crying on that. So the question is, how are the tears coming? The tears are the precipitate. The tears are the external thing. That comes because your mind is thinking about something. Okay. Or if you take the example of psychiatry, people who are crazy or who have some mental disease like schizophrenia or anything, there are hormonal changes in their body, right? So the hormonal changes is what? The precipitate. What has happened? Whereas the problem of the mind is where? In the mind. You get this point? So whatever, I mean, even a simple logic suggests this, that whatever happens in our body of desires ultimately comes out in the precipitate body. It comes out in the external world. Make sense? Yeah? So that's what we're talking. So this model is set to continue even later. That's how it is. Right? So even different species, if you see, every species has a particular ability, a particular desire that it fulfills in the best possible manner. So that's why human life is considered like a junction, as I told, where depending on what we do, you have another body which facilitates those set of desires. Maybe I'll just give a simple example. Once, some years ago, I had an opportunity to visit some places in Southeast Asia. So, I mean, kind of being in India, I had not seen that. So, in one of these countries, I saw that there was a shop that actually sold, blood. So, basically, you could get blood of any animal that you state. And just like, we have in India a juice bar, apple juice, Mossambi juice, pineapple juice, the typical menu card. You had blood of various animals, basically. And you could call for it and they would just give the blood and you could, kind of have a drink. So, of course, somebody who is not used to that perhaps may find a little strange that how would that be, how or why would I desire to drink blood? But it does seem, obviously, there are customers because the shop is running. So there are people who would desire to drink blood. And so the blood is available. But the beauty, as per Sankhya is, Sankhya suggests that, well, if that's exactly what you want to desire, you could have another body. So for example, if you see nature, there is a body of a mosquito. And the mosquito has a natural apparatus to suck and drink blood of any species. You don't have to really work hard. You don't have to, earn money and pay dollars and buy a bottle of blood. Where you can just drink very easily, right? You can just sit on anybody you wish to. Human blood chahiye, cow ka blood chahiye, anyone's blood, sit on it, suck, you have an apparatus. You get it. You understand the point? So it's a simple example, but it just suggests how different species in the world are designed in a way that different types of desires are fulfilled. Yeah, just like a pigeon. It is said a pigeon can mate about 60 times a day. It's kind of a world record, you know. No human, you know, no matter which hero is, Hollywood, Bollywood or Collywood or whatever would not be able to do that. You know, our James Bond stuff. You know, they wouldn't have the energy to last 60 times in a day. But a pigeon has that. You understood? So there are certain bodies which facilitate some desires very easily. Oh, body is first class, no problem. It's fit. You get it? So that's the theory of Sankhya. Your desires create another body. That body could be non-human or even human. Even if it's a human body, different bodies have different abilities. Are you getting what I'm saying? Like for example, some body, you know, you know, some people can sing very well. So that's again body only, right? You need to have that kind of, you know, vocal cords and that ability to sing. You understand what I'm saying? It's not that everybody will go to music class or do GP music course. You'll become like Lata Mangeshkar or somebody. For that, you need to have a body also like that. Body as in, right? That's also part of the body only. Your ability to sing. You understood? So in this way, that's how it explains desires and the next body. Yeah. So this question is, on what basis is the soul awarded the next body? Well, it's primarily based on desires. Desires. Of course, there's a second component called deserves, and that's actually karma, which we will be seeing a little later. But today I'm mainly focusing on desires. So the kind of desires that we have, that continues, you know, those kind of interests continue. Even in the Ian Stevenson's cases, where, you know, they have recorded evidences of somebody remembering past life. They have seen, like for example, that James that we showed that day, that fellow was a fighter pilot in the past life. In this life, he was born with an attachment to planes. You understood? From childhood, he liked planes. That's very interesting. His desires were all about flying planes, right from childhood. And this, he says, has been observed in several other cases as well, where the kind of interest that a person had, desires, that continues life after life. Just that when you don't know your past life, you don't know why that desire is coming. But when you see the recorded cases, you can understand the connection, that yes. And of course, the Sankhya talks about that philosophy, that one continues the desires. So now we will go more into the body of desire. So I think this slide I just skipped, but I think this line is not very clear. This is a discussion between Krishna and Arjuna, where in the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where he's saying, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. That means the theory of Sankhya is your state of consciousness is never extinguished. That means whatever your dreams and aspirations are, nature gives you repeated facility to fulfill those aspirations. You have this aspiration, come on, try it in this circumstance now. You have this aspiration, try it in this circumstance. So you continue with your desires, trying, in different bodies, in different environments, in different. So that's how Sankhya talks about it. Yeah, one second. Anybody asking a question will have to use the mic, because you know the whole thing gets recorded, so it becomes easy.
There is term moksha.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, I'm not really talking about that right now. I'll come to it when I come to talk about yoga. So very soon in my maybe 7th or 8th session, we're going to talk on the 4th set of philosophy called as Yoga and Vedanta, where I'll talk about it in detail. But I'm not touching that today, because for that there are many other things that I will need to explain. So that's not today's topic. Yeah. Anything confined to what we're speaking? Yeah, please pass the mic.
So like people's desires do change like time to time.
Very
so
good.
How is it that these desires?
Fantastic. So desires change. So the subtle body is never constant. The subtle body is always changing. But at any point of time, that means if I take point of time t, at some point of time, just like for example the gross body, even the gross body is changing. See, please remember, body means change, matter means change. See, this is the principle of physics. This is nothing to do with anything else. Matter means what? Change. That's what matter means, right? Even in physics, that's what we study matter as. Will matter ever remain constantly the same? Like this room we are seeing. Is it always going to remain like this? No, it will not, because it's matter. Matter means property is change. Similarly, even the subtle body changes. The body of desires also keep changing. How does it change? Well, it depends on whom you associate with, what kind of books you read, what kind of movies you see, what kind of friends you have, what kind of activities you're doing the entire day. what kind of job you have. You understand? Whatever we are doing in life, that determines our current state of desires. And that changes. But at the point of death, there is it's like this. What shall I say? At any point of time t, just like there is one external precipitate body, there is also a set of desires that one possesses. Right? So, it's just that nature allows you, via the medium of reincarnation, to continue those set of desires in another system. Because this system has now become very old and it is not going to function. Right? Like an old man also has desires. Why not? Right? Just like if you know this whole thing, why did they come up with this Viagra pill? Why did they come up with it? It is a pill. Viagra, you have not heard about it? Surprising. Viagra is nothing but a pill which an old man can take, because an old man has desires for sex, but his tools don't cooperate. So he takes a pill to get his system working. You understand? Because he has desires. Desire hai. Lekin body is not functioning because it is old. Are you getting it? Simple thing. That's why they have Viagra. Of course. I mean, they were all, if you're in touch with news and science and medicine, you understand this. I read about one case, true case. There was a 65-year-old Delhi gentleman who had a lot of desires, but tools were not working. So he popped up Viagra. And he died of a heart attack while sex. Because, the excitement was too much for him to take. So he just, he collapsed dead. Yeah, true story. I'm not making it up. Right? We need examples, right? Only then we understand some theory. Are you getting this point? Sure. See, so what we are saying is, the precipitate body has to do activities, but the body of desires cultivate desires. So at any point of time X, there is a set of desires that you are strongly inclined to do. That means there is a program in our mind. हर एक के मन में program है कि नहीं? कुछ तो करना है अभी आज. We never wake up in the morning thinking that कुछ नहीं करना है. ऐसा नहीं है. Always you think अभी क्या करना है? क्या करना है? मेरे को ये करना है, वो करना है. College जाना है, अच्छे मार्क कमाना है, GRE पढ़ना है, अमेरिका जाना है. Correct? We are planning all this. But sometimes before our plans execute, death may terminate things. So nature, via the medium of reincarnation, allows you to continue your plans. That's the theory here, where you get a thing. Is that okay? Make sense? Any other quick question or comment? Yeah? Just take the mic, whoever is talking. My today's session is like, I have only 17 slides, so I wanted a little more discussion today. Yeah, go ahead.
So what if a person does not have any desire?
That is very theoretical. That is possible, like I'll tell you, I'll have to go into yoga for that. Like if you see the Buddhist system of nirvana, basically it means to empty out the desires. इसके बारे में बाद में बात करता हूँ. But generally speaking, it is not possible. The reason is the soul is ananda, by definition, bliss. That means everybody is pleasure seeking. That's why I had mentioned initially that everyone is pleasure seeking. And when you are seeking pleasure, by your very definition of existence, you have to seek pleasure in some concrete ways. How can you remain abstractly without seeking pleasure? It's not possible. You understood the challenge? See, we are not a dead stone. Like for example, does this Panasonic camera have a desire? No, it does not have a desire. Right? Neither a mobile phone has a desire, neither my Apple computer has a desire. So it does not have a desire because it's not a living thing. When you are living, how can you exist without desires? It's very theoretical if you carefully think about it. Because it violates your definition in terms of looking for pleasure. And looking for pleasure is what everyone is looking for. Not only humans, even the dogs and the cats and the lions and the tigers, everyone is looking for pleasure. So you can't violate that. Okay, right. Any other question? Yeah, wait, come on. This guy has. नहीं हो गया उसको question हो गया ना. Sorry for this botheration of this mic, but yeah.
Sir, how to select from? There could be many desires. So how it may, some of them are selected for the next?
No, it's always a package, right? It's always a package. That means it is not. So there are two ways. One is that generally everybody is a bag of desires. It is never that I have only one desire. एक ही desire है मेरे life में. I want a wife from America. It doesn't happen like that, right? You have many other desires also. I want a wife from America, but I want a job in Microsoft also. नहीं तो सिर्फ wife from America रहेगा, job नहीं रहेगा तो divorce हो जाएगा. फायदा नहीं है ना? So we have multiple desires. Are you understanding? We have multiple desires in terms of what we want to actually achieve. And every body is also like that only. It fulfills multiple desires. Why not? And if there are too many, there is a sequence of bodies also available, right? There is no, there is like, you have a lot of time. We are talking about eternality from this perspective. So it's like बहुत time है तुम्हारे पास, अलग अलग शरीर हो सकते हैं. That will fulfill different. Yeah, this and then that's it. I'll go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, all the desires.
All the desires can be fulfilled by the human body, most of them.
Good question. Very good question. Very good thought process. Human body is certainly the best among all, because as you rightly said, you could do several things in it at the same time. That's actually something very special about it. But still, if you carefully observe, it's, certain things, there is a limit to what you could do in certain domains. You understand what I'm saying? Like for example, if you take the 4 basic activities of eating, sleeping, sex and defense, if you compare one-on-one, most animals are better at it than humans. Like even if you see a dog can eat much more than a normal gentleman could actually devour. What to speak of sleeping? There are frogs who hibernate 3 months, bears that hibernate 6 months. They really sleep well. Even if sometimes we say, मेरे को बहुत सोना है आज, कोई उठाने का नहीं मुझे. But still after 10 hours you have to get up. You will get bed sore otherwise. There is you try to fulfill a lot through the body, human, but still human body is the best. But there are certain things that are best done in other things, right? Yeah. Okay, we'll just take 2 more and then that's it. Yeah. Who had a question here? Yeah.
So as we know that death is fixed, so is desire?
No, 1 second. I never said that.
It's like.
Hold on. Yeah.
We are uncertain about death. Then.
Yeah. It is uncertain.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Oh, it's fixed in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. मतलब वो होने वाला है, as sure as death. Okay, great. Go ahead.
So is desire fixed?
No, it's not.
That at this desire you're gonna die is.
No. Why should it be? Desire is a flexible thing. See, please remember, very good point you raised. Thanks for that. The soul as such, the Sankhya explains, pay attention, has only one ability. That means if you ask him, what is the one thing that you can actually do yourself? It is to generate desires. That's basically what is called as free will. Like we all have a free will by which we generate desires. You understood? If your desires are also pre-programmed, then what is the difference between us and a computer? When the computer does not have any option, right? Right now I am projecting a PPT. Can it say, "Nahi, मेरे को PPT bore हो गया, अभी movie project करना है"? ऐसा नहीं बोल सकता ना? But you have an option. You can get out of the class saying that you're bored. A computer is not like that. Are you getting it? So desires is the only thing that is generatable by the soul. You can generate sets of desires, and the mind is the medium for one to do that. Okay? Here. I'll take it a little later. Hold on. Yeah.
Why some souls can't get body?
Great. I think I briefly mentioned that when we were talking about the idea of the ghost. But it's a very simple thing. The body is not given to some. I'm not really going to make a very detailed presentation on ghost. That's not part of my schedule. So I'm just kind of answering his question. Utna hi kar raha hu main. Because please remember, this whole presentation that I'm doing in 30 hours is just a drop in the ocean of Indian philosophy. I'm just presenting one drop to you. If we would present the philosophy, all these things in detail, Sankhya, Vaisheshika, it takes decades of study for that. It's very, very detailed. So I make that point here. So we are not doing a comprehensive study of 6. No, we are just doing an overview of 6. That's all. Answering his question, the ghost, as I had mentioned earlier, I think when I spoke, is nothing but the Atma with only the body of desires. So why is it like that? It is like that due to certain karma. So when I come to karma, maybe I will speak on it a little bit. But the idea is that there are certain actions that a person does, which, like for example, when a person commits suicide, let's go back to the same thing. The logic is, when I have committed suicide, what I am trying to tell nature is, मेरे को शरीर नहीं चाहिए. You understood? मेरे को नहीं चाहिए शरीर. I'm fed up with this body. मेरे को नहीं चाहिए. That's why a person hangs or consumes poison, right? Because he says that I don't want this body. I'm fed up with this nonsense. मेरे को नहीं चाहिए. So nature says, okay, that is also desire. तुमको नहीं चाहिए, तो रहो बिना शरीर के. That's the idea. It again fulfills your own desire. That's why we are responsible for whatever situation we are in. Because you didn't want it. Okay, live without it. But then there is an issue. Then you have desire, but then you're wondering how. So anyway, but more about that on ghost especially, I don't want to tell too much because if I had to defend that idea, I had to present many more cases, which I'm actually not doing in the course for lack of time. Any other question? Pass her.
No. Like other experiments, can we consider like Planchet and stuff as an experiment to prove ghosts and stuff?
I know, I really don't want to go into that. I just leave it at that because many times there are people who do many silly things, but they really don't. I mean, it's more a waste of time, what you're talking about. Many times, one doesn't really get. But I can tell you this much, that there are, various, even about, so ghost is not such a mythical entity. There are many kind of recorded evidences across the world, not just in India actually. In fact, outside India you find many more of such cases. Because this is a science, right? Ultimately, it's not that only if an Indian commits suicide, according to Indian philosophy, becomes a ghost. Aisa to nahi hai. Whoever you may be, so it's like that. Go ahead. Last one, I'll go ahead.
Sir, we also, like many of the times you also say that a ghost, exists because of unfulfilled desires.
Exactly. That is also there. Yeah, it's both. See, because unfulfilled desires are there, right, in that entity. If he were completely fulfilled, as in, then he comes in what he had pointed out, moksha, he's liberated. He doesn't have to get another body. In that context, it is unfulfilled only. अगर fulfill नहीं हुआ तो इसलिए तो आत्महत्या किया उसने. He has so many desires. Just there is negativity and pessimism. So desires are there and that's unfulfilled, and that's what actually possession means basically. So where try to get something. Yeah. So I'll go ahead right this point. I'll take your question a little later. Just hold it on. Yeah, because we're kind of running out of time a little bit. Great. Thanks a lot. I really want a lot of discussion, and I don't even mind going slow from now on. But as such, I would love to have a lot of discussion. So I'll come back to your question. Maybe after this session, I'll just take yours as well. So I really appreciate if people ask and think. The goal of this course is not to complete the slides, because anyway we are not going to complete Indian philosophy. But it is just that you should have a good experience and you should think. That's what, even if you see the questions that I asked you, I want you to think. That's what philosopher means. One who loves knowledge, one who thinks. Going ahead. Yeah, so we'll just try to present some logic for the body of desires. That means this body of desires, or the subtle body that I spoke of, can we talk about some logic as to why and how it exists? See, basically, by definition, like the soul, the mind is atomic and indivisible. I hope you understand these terms. Atomic and indivisible means one entity. That means it's not that we have several souls. Of course, there may be several souls in the form of, there may be many germs or, many other bodies sitting within this body. But I am that one conscious entity which is aware of this body. Those others are foreign particles that are sitting inside. So just like the soul is atomic and indivisible, even the mind is so. There is just one in every body. It's just one mind. Okay? The existence of the mind is not perceived. It's not perceived. We understand that. So that's the whole problem in modern science. Where is the mind? Pucha to answer nahi hai. Because as I had told you earlier, when you come from earth to ether, it becomes more and more subtle. And when you come to the mind, it's more subtle, because you cannot see, you cannot hear, you cannot smell, you cannot taste, you cannot touch the mind. So the mind is, so how do we understand mind? By inference. So if you remember, we had spoken about perception, inference, verbal testimony. So inference. So what is the inference? So I'm just presenting one logic for inference over here. You'll have to pay attention to get it really, what we are talking. Okay, so the first, so now we are trying to present the inference for the existence of mind. So the first point I wish to say is it is apparent that external sense faculties are necessary for the perception of external objects of the world. Right? Everyone agrees with this? That means I need my eyes, nose, ears, tongue and touch sensation to deal with external objects of the world. Correct? If I don't have one of these, I am impaired in understanding some external thing of the world. Everybody agrees? Very good. Simple logic. Yeah, now look at this. Likewise, an internal sense faculty is also required for the perception of internal objects. For example, there is cognition, feeling, pleasure, pain, and so on. These are actually very tricky terms in science, please remember. What is actually pleasure, pain? Please try to understand, what is pleasure, pain? In a very scientific definition, you know how it is defined? Pleasure and pain are defined as secretion of certain hormones. It's a very, very physical definition. You understood? There are pills available in the market which can make you happy. That means if I eat the pill, some pleasure secreting hormones get generated. So, अच्छा लगेगा मुझे. But does it really work? I mean, just try to imagine if someone, God forbid, he went home and his entire home is on fire and all his family is dead and gone, and he eats 2 pills. Pleasure generating hormone को release करने के लिए. तो भाई कैसे यार, मेरा मन तो एकदम विचलित है अभी. You know, I am troubled. There's some experience that I am undergoing. There's a trauma. You understood? So this is the, sometimes we can call it as the foolishness of our present day understandings, where we think everything just in physical terms. That simply by setting hormone right, I become happy. And one can see that just does not work. It is not a process that works. There is evidence for it by perception. You understood? So there is an so now what? There is some faculty which is perceiving these things. Now, which is that faculty? Certainly it's not the brain. That is at least proved as per modern science. The brain is just connected to, it's just connected to various parts of your body controlling things. So where is that perception? That's first thing. Yeah, now this is a very important part. Now here you have to pay a little attention. I have written some stuff. We need to pay a little, I know you have to concentrate a little, but it will help you. At least understand and appreciate what we are talking. The mind is this internal sense faculty. This is the proposition I am making. You understood? A proposition? A proposition. Second, it is apparent, now this is the most important point, that the 5 external senses may all be in contact with their objects simultaneously, but not all of these perceptions are received at the same time. Now try to understand what I am saying. I am trying to say that the 5 external senses, we have 5 senses, the eyes, the nose, the ears, the tongue and the touch. Simultaneously, our 5 senses may be in contact with a sense object. But all of them are not received at the same time. Just like, for example, you are sitting in a class, and let us say you are very absorbed in hearing the class that I am giving, or any professor is giving, or somebody is giving. Let us say you are simultaneously chewing a gum as well. Please note that simultaneously when you are chewing a gum and at the same time absorbed in hearing a class, the juice that comes from the gum and that sensation from that is actually subordinate. Because what is happening is all these perceptions are not being received at the same time. You understand what I'm saying? So I'll elaborate this a little more. I'll give some more example. Basically what I'm trying to say is that there has to be some other agent besides the external senses that limits the number of received perceptions to one perception at a time. Okay, I'll give you a little more superlative example. Perhaps professor ka example you may have not appreciated because nobody anyway listens to the professor. Let us say a boy is sitting in a park with his girlfriend. They're sitting, they're meeting after a long time. They're very excited that they never got to meet for a long time because, you know, dono ke parents ne bahut taklif diya. They never got to meet. So they're sitting in a park. As they're sitting in the park and talking to each other and just looking at each other, there is some, you know, let us say, one Pani Puri wala who has set up a stall nearby. He has Pani Puri and, you know, he has all the bhel and the, you know, the 2 liquids that you put inside that puri, you know. Right. I'm sorry for that, but now the beauty is this boy and girl who are sitting there in the park are able to smell that thing, right? वो भी सुगंध जा रहा है ना उनके system में. That pani, that kajur imli का जो चटनी है, that also has a fragrance, and that is entering his nose. But do you think at that particular point of time, the mind is perceiving that? No, it's not. They don't even care. They don't know that the pani puri wala is there. उनको मालूम भी नहीं कि ऐसा एक आदमी बैठा है यहाँ पर. Why? Because, try to understand, because even though there are many perceptions, that's what I was trying to tell you. if you're very absorbed, or let us say they're sitting in the park and it is middle of summer where it is 40 degrees. So it's actually hot. But they are not even perceiving the heat. They are not perceiving the smell. They are only perceiving the eyes. Because they're just looking at each other and they're meeting each other after a very long time. Other perceptions are diminished. Are you getting it? So how does that happen that other perceptions are diminished? If you just simply think about the brain as one entity, brain is giving signals of everything. So there has to be conflicting signals within, right? The fellow is sitting and thinking that khajur imli chutney ki smell aa rahi hai abhi yahan par. So the girlfriend will give him one slap saying that what nonsense, you know? I didn't come here to meet you to hear about khajur imli chutney. I have come for some other purpose. You get this point what I'm saying? So the logic here, try to understand the logic here. We're actually talking about logic. The logic here is, though there are many perceptions, some perceptions are being filtered in the system, some perceptions are being ignored, some perceptions are taken in. Who's doing that? Is the question. And the answer to that is the mind. The mysterious entity called as the mind, which must exist. Otherwise, if it's not there and there is only the brain, all the input should be coming to you simultaneously and you should be aware of everything. But it doesn't happen. So that means the point here is, in other words, although two or more external senses may be simultaneously receiving data. You understood this? The boy and the girl are looking at each other and simultaneously they're also smelling the, the food. Only that which is being attended to is actually perceived. You're attending to that, right? I mean, a normal fellow goes to the park without a girlfriend or a boyfriend, then he's smelling pani puri only, because then there's nothing else to, he's looking, is there any food which I can buy and, at least fill my belly. Right? So the logic here is attention. See, this word is very important. Attention represents the coordination of the mind and the senses. Attention. And every perception requires the contact of a mind with an object by means of senses. Your mind has to coordinate with one sense to decide which one. So ideally speaking, if you are a student and sitting in the class, the sense that should be most active is the ear, the hearing. Not the smell, not the, the temperature, none of that. If you're really absorbed in that, you get the stuff. It's as simple as that. So that's what we call as attention. Or a superlative term used for attention is concentration. And this concentration, attention are functions of what in your system? That's the point here. That's the mind. That's how the mind is defined. Additionally, so the logic concludes by saying, additionally, if the mind were not a partless entity, you understood? If the mind not part, then there would be simultaneous contact of many parts of the mind with many senses. That means, I had said earlier, right, that the mind is atomic, right? Atomic and indivisible. That means it's just one mind. So if the mind is not a partless entity, that means it's made of parts and every part is perceiving, from different places, there would be simultaneous contact of many parts of the mind with many senses, and many perceptions would subsequently appear at one time. And if that happens, you cannot actually concentrate or focus on anything. But we see in our own experience that that's not how it happens. We are able to focus just on one sense and ignoring everything else. That is attention or concentration. That's the ability of the mind. Of course, for someone whose attention span is very less, nowadays you have these psychiatric diseases called as attention disorder. Matlab attention hi nahi hota. You know how that comes? Because of too much agitation. So that means there are many kids in Pune, and there's a very common disease, attention disorder, attention deficiency syndrome. Bahut sara bade naam hai actually, sab disease ke. These are all mental diseases treated in today's psychiatry, where people don't have attention abilities. And partly it is also because of living style. As in, for example, see, nowadays, like, you sit in front of the television channel, you have like 100 channels to browse through. So attention span hi nahi hota. One channel you're thinking, you constantly keep changing. So the ability where you say that my mind, let me fix it on one thing, is not there. Even if you see when people open internet, simultaneously they open 20 browsers, everything, they open everything, they're looking. So there's no attention, you understood? So by our own activities, we cultivate in our mind an attention disorder. That's exactly what happens in today's world. Do you know one thing? That most CEOs in America like this Apple, this fellow was there. What's his name? नहीं अभी का नहीं वो पहले वाला. Jobs. Steve Jobs and many of these people. Steve Jobs had given an interview. He said that most of the American big CEOs of software, hardware, multinational companies, their children, they have put in schools and systems where there is no computer and internet. Can you believe it? I read that interview of Steve Jobs. After he died, it was published. It said that he had put his children in a system of education where there was no internet and computer at all. He said because it's not required. I mean, I was like, come on, you are talking about it. Why? Because you've seen it. It's a fact. It's a fact that when your attention is when you cultivate through your habits a system where you encourage inattention, the mind loses the ability to be attentive. And then you have to suffer an attention deficiency syndrome and a lack of concentration abilities. It's a very simple thing. It's all cultivated. It's all invited. You know, in our Hindi, what we say, bail mujhe maar. We invite that on ourselves. Yeah, so is this making sense? If the mind were not a partless entity, there would be simultaneous contact of many parts of the mind with many senses, and many perceptions would subsequently appear at one time. The fact that this never happens, it doesn't happen, basically proves that the mind is partless, atomic, and an internal sense faculty of perception. It's an internal faculty of perception. Just like there's an external faculty of perception, there's an internal faculty of perception. And that's why I had told you earlier also that the mind also has its own eyes through which it sees. Like that's why we had mentioned earlier that even blind people, when they undergo near-death experience, they come back and they report that they saw something. Now the interesting thing is a blind man generally doesn't see anything at all, right? But that fellow, when he experiences NDE, he sees and he comes back and reports. So there are many such things also that talk about, you know, somebody whose external sense is not working, but that internal sense is working. But normally there is a problem, correct? Just like, for example, if I have a software which drives a printer, but if I don't have a printer only, will I print? No. Software है print करने का, device driver है, लेकिन printer है क्या? Printer गायब. So will it print? No. Similarly, I have a mind which can see, which sees, but my eyes are not there, I'm blind. So I don't perceive that sense. It's a simple logic. Make sense? Because ultimately these external senses are nowhere important. Actually in Sankhya and Vaisheshika, what you see in the external world is not important at all, it is said. Because these eyes are just external. I can remove these eyes and put another set of eyes. What is most important is the internal perception, which is the mind, which is considered the king of the senses. Yeah, so that's about the mind. So I'll just make this slide also because there's a connection with what we have been talking, and then maybe we'll open for questions once again. So this is basically the model of Sankhya that talks about the interaction. So the point is that these 5 senses are kind of connected to the mind, and the main functions of the mind are thoughts, unfulfilled desires, and previous experiences. So basically the mind has all experiences related to eyes, nose, tongue, ear, and skin. Are you understanding? That means any experience which we had with our external sense, that experience is recorded within the mind. And basically all we are looking for is for repeating pleasurable experiences and avoiding unpleasurable experiences. Because we want happiness, so you know, that's the mind. Whereas the intelligence is again, please remember, it is not an entity, it is a function. I had told that before itself, that the body of desires has functions. Intelligence as a function is basically a decision maker to decide whether something should be done now or not. You know, so that part is called intelligence. I'll take another example very soon. Okay, sorry, I don't know how this one came, so leave it. Yeah, so maybe I'm just wondering, maybe I'll just take this one more slide and then I will open for some questions. Okay, this is one more slide. So functions and characteristics of the mind. So this basically tries to summarize several things that we have been talking or we did not talk, but to summarize. Yeah, so the Sankhya explains that the primary function of the mind is what is called as Sankalpa Vikalpa. Sankalpa Vikalpa in Sanskrit means to accept and to reject. So basically this it does with the help of the intelligence. So accepting and rejecting. Accepting and rejecting means, if you see very carefully, the inputs that come through our senses, we accept certain things. Accept as in we want to do it, or we want to have that experience or reject it as unfavorable. So this is called, and the mind is considered fickle, because of which what it accepts today, it may reject tomorrow. Or what it rejects today, it may accept tomorrow. You understood? Like, don't we talk about something called as infatuation, where someone is temporarily attracted to something. Just like, for example, how does advertisement companies work? If you know their philosophy behind their working, it is to repeatedly bombard the customer with a message of their product. Repeated bombardment. And that repeated bombardment, what happens is 20 times if you hear it, you feel that maybe that product is good. First time when you hear, you feel nonsense, I don't want it. Second time you hear, third time, no, I don't want it. Fourth, no, sometimes suddenly you may feel that I may want it. You understood this? Because your mind is accepting and rejecting. And suddenly it can accept as well. That's why there is something also called as impulsive behavior. Impulsive behavior. And this is again something which is based on this. That means when I accept something, I immediately, impulsively want to experiment with that. You get it? And because of the impulsive behavior, people do several things as well, where they land in trouble. Because, impulsively, they feel very strongly that they want to try out something, but then that may not be the best thing. So, later they regret. Do you get this point really? Yeah? So, it's always there, because the mind is constantly doing this accepting, rejecting stuff. Sorry. So I'm just introducing yoga by saying that the definition of yoga as per Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which I will come to very soon, 2 sessions down the line, is called as Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. That means to stabilize the mind so that it can stabilize from its platform of Sankalpa Vikalpa. That means it can be fixed and not waver so quickly. You understood? So generally, one system is such that we waver between accepting and rejecting very soon. Correct? I accept something now, but then very soon I reject it. Whether it is an object or whether it is even a person in a relationship. We accept things and then we reject it. People accept relationships and they reject relationships. Right? So this all happens because of accepting and rejecting. So the whole purpose of yoga is to stabilize the mind and to stabilize that accepting, rejecting system. That's what it is. That's the definition of it. By definition. How it achieves this is a different thing. We'll talk about that a little later. Yeah, so I'll come to this thing. So the Buddhist understanding, for example, is to neglect. That's what the definition of nirvana is. To neglect this accepting, rejecting. I mean, their understanding is that the mind will constantly keep bombarding something, just neglect it. Just like one neglects a 2-year-old child when one goes to the shop. You take a 2-year-old child to the shop, the child keeps saying, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want everything. But then you know that you can't treat the 2-year-old kid too seriously. Otherwise you'll become mad. So similarly, the mind keeps saying that I want this also, I want this also. Kabhi to na bolna hi padega usko. So that's what is neglect, used as a tool. And also the mind is, I'll take questions very soon. The mind is also called as a source of all happiness and distress. That means pleasure and pain is actually defined in Sankhya and everything as a mental experience only. Nothing is physical. It's all mental. That means the physical is just a very external thing. The whole question is your mind experiencing pleasure or is your mind experiencing pain? You understood? So it's like all kinds of feelings are in the mind. All kinds of experiences are impressions in the mind. Correct? Like even taste. If you say taste, it's not that the tongue wants to taste a particular drug. Like if a drug addict is there who's finding pleasure in drugs, his tongue is not tasting that. The mind is tasting it. The mind has that previous experience recorded and the mind is crazy to repeat that experience. Because that experience had given him some intoxication. So he wants to repeat it again. And again, and again. You understood? So the mind is considered this. There's a beautiful story in Greek history of Alexander, where Alexander once, we all know the story of Alexander. He traveled all over the world to conquer the whole world. Right? And when he was in one place, he saw one saint sitting under a tree. And this guy was just sitting. So Alexander asked him, hey, what are you doing sitting here like a useless fellow? Why don't you do something? So the saint said, I'm very sorry, but can I know what are you doing? He said, I'm going to conquer the whole world. Oh really? He said. So he said, what are you going to achieve after that? I'm going to be happy after that. The saint said, I'm already happy. So that's why I'm sitting here peacefully. So please give way and go ahead. So it's a Greek story of Alexander and this fellow. But the whole point is that it's ultimately the mind that needs to experience happiness. It's mental happiness that actually everyone is looking for. The only dilemma is that in today's world, we understand the mind as some hormonal changes in the body. So, but that's a different thing. But that I already told you. That's because we understand only the precipitate and not the desires. That's a very simple thing, right? Yeah, so the mind is actually the taster of mellow. Mellow means relationships. So, you know, like we all have various relationships, whether it's a friend, with a parent, as a child, as a sibling, as a lover, or whatever kind of relationships a person has in this world, the taster of all those relationships is also the mind. It is the mind that tastes those relationships. That's why the externals, we quickly get bored of the externals. I mean, I'm sure that we all have this experience. I mean, you buy a new mobile phone, immediately we are very much attracted to it. And I generally know whenever I purchased a new phone, always I got a cover also with it. For 2 days, I would keep it in the cover and take it out. And the 4th day, we threw that cover out as a disturbance, as a nuisance. Because, you know, putting it in and taking it out is so bothersome that it... And then the mobile becomes a very... as an object to send SMS or browse the net or do something like that. And not really to look at its beauty as such. So pretty much like that, the mind is a taster of the mellows. Because it's the experience that one is looking for. Yeah, so we all have the saying also that the Idle Mind Devil's Workshop, as in... the mind needs engagement. The mind needs to be engaged in some meaningful activity always. That means the mind always needs to be in contact with some sense, trying to understand something, without which it will just continue to be too disturbed or distracted. Yeah, so at this point, any questions? I have many more things to say about the mind as well, but just to make it a little more interactive. And where is the mic, by the way? Is my mic gone? Yeah, there. Great, mic is close to you. Just take it at the 3rd level. Yeah. Yeah, there are 3 levels. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
So going back to choosing the body,
good.
if the human body is the best body available to fulfill all the desires, why doesn't every soul choose the human body?
No, it's not like that. I already told you, the human body is not the best to fulfill all desires. That's what I was telling in answer to his question.
Most of the desires.
No, not exact. That's why I give you examples also, right? That there are so many things that it becomes very difficult to do in the human body. You want to fly in the air, you want to swim in water, so many things you cannot do in the human body. I mean, you can fly in an aeroplane, but that's different. I mean, people want experience, right? Like nowadays, you know, in India, for example, or all over the world, you know, this parachute gliding and, you know, jumping, what is that, bungee jumping, and these are very famous hobbies and things that people look for, right? But you want to experience. See, ultimately, every soul is looking for this one word, experience. You want to experience certain fantasies, certain dreams. There are many bodies that are... the only thing is that there are some bodies which are superlative in something. The human body, we try everything out. And what we do in human bodies, with technology, we aid. Like, we also want to jump from the sky and see how it looks. But naturally, we cannot do it like an eagle or a vulture or something that just, you know, moves down very naturally. So we do bungee jumping. So we use technology for it. We want to jump like that bird, but since we cannot do it naturally, we say that, okay, I'll pay $5,000, go up in the sky and jump and see how it is. You know, though there is threat to life or whatever. So, but the point is that naturally you cannot do everything. And please remember, that also costs money. It's not cheap. So that's why there are other bodies. Make sense? Yeah. Any other question here? Yeah, okay. Sam here, bring it ahead. Yeah, give it to her. Yeah. Yeah, just don't off the mic. Let it be on. No issues. No, it's up. Just don't off it. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't understand what the mind exactly is. I mean, is it the same thing as consciousness? And you also mentioned that the mind stores past experiences and memories and also. Doesn't the brain do that? So what exactly is the mind?
Okay, good. Yeah, good. Thanks for asking. We'll come back to that. So, see, it's like this. The soul is the unit of consciousness. It is conscious. That means, consciousness means to be aware, right? However, one second, hold on. For it to develop its own thoughts, desires, to store memory in terms of experiences. In terms of experiences. Please remember, I am not talking memory strictly in terms of, something very mechanistic, like you by hearted something and, whether you remember that. That generally nobody remembers actually. That kind of memory that we talk of, in terms of, like for an exam when you're studying for something, you cram a lot of stuff. And even the best student, he has to forget it only because it was never recorded as an experience in your system. So it's very temporarily there in your system. It just goes away very soon. You understood? Now, if you see the brain, that basically, that's what I was telling you earlier. Our understanding that we have is that basically, what shall I say, it retrieves or coordinates with memory and tries to remember, connect to that previous experience. So it's again like the same thing, I want to raise my hand. So there's a part of my brain that allows me to go my hand up. There is a part of my brain that actually allows me to go back to my memory. Like if you see in that, can I have some silence there? Second last bench. Yeah. If you go back to that example of Penfield, where I stroke a part of the brain that controls memory, suddenly my previous memory comes in front of me, as in the mind. You understood? But again, it is not understood in science as to where this thing is coming from. We just know that some part of the brain controls it. And if that part of the brain gets damaged, a person forgets. That's what we call loss of memory. Loss of memory. Like somebody suffers an accident and that part of the brain is damaged, he fails to recall previous experiences temporarily because there is a cutoff. You understood this? So the mind basically is a system for you to store your thoughts and desires. Just like, for example, I am a businessman. I am working with a computer. The computer is my body. All my Excel sheet and PowerPoint and various things that I store in terms of, my experiences, I record that in various documents. That is the mind. And I myself am different. Okay, but it's just that I'm allowed to take my software and go to the next laptop after death, where I can reboot with my previous set of desires and experiences and continue and try ahead. So that's why if you see the mind, that's why there is something called as conscious mind and subconscious mind. Conscious mind is something that's more external, where for example you remember recent events in your life. But if I ask you what you did in your 6th birthday, you will not remember because that's too far to behind, unless that was a very special experience or something. We generally don't remember it. So subconscious mind means something, some experience which is there in our system, but we have lost track of it. So subconscious mind, that's a technical name to it, subconscious mind. So people do things like hypnotic regression to get out things from the subconscious mind, to revive those memories. But sometimes the problem is it doesn't come as it is. It comes in a mixed form. So through hypnosis, somebody tries to get out what was there in your 6th birthday. Perhaps those events or experiences will be merged with something else that happened in neighborhood with your friend's birthday, and you may say something which may not be exactly what you underwent. So you understood? So the experiences are there in the mind. So basically it is nothing but a substance, a stratum where you develop your desires. The soul is the originator of it, but he is given this system where he can, transform this piece of software, where he can transform and do what he wishes to. Now from the modern mechanistic perspective, I agree that we don't even know that the mind exists. Though we all know that we are cultivating these desires and experiences. And we know mental problems like happiness and distress only in terms of hormonal changes. That's the only definition we can give in very mechanistic terms. Is that okay? Yeah, bring it ahead. Yeah.
Sir, when there was no life on earth, where were the desires at that time?
Okay, so once again, the desires are not connected with the creation and dissolution. The desires are the property of the soul and the mind. You understood? The world is created in a way to fulfill one's desires. It is not a question of, when the world, it is not that when the world is not there, you will not have desires. I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. Try to understand this. Suppose, let us say hypothetically, now I'm giving you a very graphic example, but it will convey the theme. Suppose hypothetically, you take a boy at the age of 3 or 4, and let us say he grows in a school where he doesn't see a woman only. He doesn't see, there's no woman only, let us say, some forest. There's no girl itself, there's no female gender. Now you tell me, will his desires not awaken at a particular time, even though the world is not there? That means the world of female gender isn't there around him, but still this fellow, there is that story in Ramayana about this fellow called Rishyashringa, whose father does this particular experiment with him, but it fails badly. Because you don't need the world. The world is there within the mind itself, where you are cultivating all your desires. The world is just an external precipitate for you to fulfill those desires. But even without it, the desires are there. Why not? Yeah.
Sir, and we know multiple personality disorder. Then what is it?
I'm not exactly sure of that. There are nowadays too many psychiatric problems around in the world. But the way it looks like to me is a conflict of various egos in terms of, confusion. See, basically, it's all centered around, everybody has one personality where, as in he wants to, he has to have one set of identity in some way to function perfectly. But there are too many overlaps, there is problem. But I don't know, honestly, I don't know what you're talking about in exact terms. We can check up on something else. Yeah.
Sir, I just want to ask,
this and this, yeah.
I just wanted to ask that there are people, means we are sometimes physically present but mentally absent, but the thing which is going in front of us is stored in subconscious mind. So why can't we access that?
You can. Why not? You do access. Just like, for example, let us say you're driving down the road and you come across some special shop that sells some pav bhaji. Though you're driving, you're going somewhere to office, suddenly it just clicks you, arey wah, fantastic pav bhaji shop, maybe I should go sometime and eat. But then you don't have time, you don't have attention at that time because you have to report to office at 10 o'clock. So you just run ahead. But it is stored. Later, someday, after 1 year, when you're walking with your family down that road, you are revived, you're reminded of that desire that you wanted to eat pav bhaji. Suddenly it clicks, arey ye pav bhaji khana tha yahan par, bahut din se main soch raha tha. Today I'll fulfill it. So of course you're reminded. Your mind does pop up the desire when the right environment is available. Because it stores many desires. When the environment is there, come on, this desire could be fulfilled. Why not do it right now? Yeah, just pass behind. That and that. Yeah, two of you. Yes. You also have a question? Yeah, okay. 1, 2 and 3. That's it. And then we'll go ahead. I have to finish by 4, 4, 5. Yeah.
My question may or may not be related to this.
Absolutely no problem. You can ask anything you wish to.
Sir, we are talking about desires. So I wanted to ask that why is it that sometimes we forget about our own happiness and tend to follow or tend to wish for others' idea of happiness and forget and then regret?
Well, it could be in two ways. One is because we are attached to another person. Like for example, let's say that somebody doesn't want to do engineering at all, but let us say his parents wish that their child does engineering, and because we love our parents, we feel that perhaps we should fulfill their desire and we try it out. So sometimes there also there is a desire. The desire is to please the parent because of which one does it. So sometimes to your, so like sometimes the mother says, my only desire is to make you happy. In that sense, that way, that is also a desire only, to give happiness to another person. And for whatever would make another person happy, you do it. You understand what I'm saying? Just like for example, I'm just giving an example. I met recently one lady who was kind of related to me in some way. So she was an 80-year-old lady who had cancer and she was on her deathbed. But her granddaughter's marriage was going on in America. And her granddaughter requested that she be present over Skype. So this 80-year-old grandmother decked herself, she was a Marwadi lady, decked herself in traditional Marwadi dress with all ornaments and was sitting in front of the computer. So when we asked her, why did you do all this dressing up? She said that to make my granddaughter happy, because she's watching, she knows that I am there over Skype and she wants to see me happy. So for her happiness, I have dressed. So we all do things in life to make another people happy. So that's natural. That's part of desire. That's also a desire only. Behind.
If we consider that the soul doesn't desire anything.
Oh, it desires.
Suppose we consider it doesn't desire, so it won't take any body. So what happens to the soul after?
Yeah, that is something. So that's what I was telling you. When I talk about moksha and yoga, I will talk about that. I'm not coming to that today.
So why do we dream some specific events like?
We dream those things that have maximum impact on our experience generally. Swapna is connected to Jagriti. When I experience something, and if generally you will observe, dreams are connected to strong experiences in the real world. Because that gets stored in your subconscious mind, and even when you are switched off externally, that subconscious experiences throws various combinations in front of you, and you see that.
So who dreams? Subconscious mind?
No, who dreams means the person is only dreaming, the soul. But it is like the soul, see, it's like he's seeing through it's like a television. The mind is like a television which the fellow is seeing. Like you're sitting in front of a computer or a television. What is happening on the television? You're looking and you're happy or you're sad. So the mind is the television which is propelling through which you are only propelling. Who's controlling the channel on the TV? You're only controlling. You could switch it off. We will talk about that later. But you are only controlling the channels. It's completely the source, the free will, which does that. Last question in this series before we go ahead. No, later, next.
So,
washroom, go ahead, anytime.
So yeah, what happened to that guy in the jungle? The boy who was in the jungle, only guys and stuff. Seriously.
You're asking about the story of Rishashringa of Ramayana. Oh, that's a very, very long story, but the story...
How did it fail?
Yeah. No, the story...
I'm seriously.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, since anyway, the point is that he grows up in that environment where there are only men in a forest. But it so happens that there is a neighboring king who wants his daughter married to that boy, But still he's afraid of sending his girl there directly because his father will become very upset with him. So he sends some girl in male form because this boy had only seen men. So he sends some woman in male form when this father is not there. Rishashringa's father isn't there. When this fellow sees these people, immediately he feels attracted. He says, I have never seen such people ever. I saw all kinds of people with big beards and so on. So who are you all? He says that we all exist across the river. We have come to take you. And they kidnap him. It's a case of kidnap basically. He runs away and he gets married to that girl. That's it. That's how the story ends. But it's very short actually. I could describe in greater detail. But my only point was, desires exist in the mind, not in the world. The world is only an external precipitate for us to fulfill them. Even if the world isn't there, your desires still are there. That's what I'm saying. It's because it's precipitate. Yeah, I think you had a question in a long time. Maybe I'll just take that, and that's really the last in this series. Give it to her. Yeah, the mic is coming. Yeah. Go ahead.
But not having a desire is also a desire, right?
Yeah, so this not having desire business now we will take later. Leave it. Yeah. See, obviously, in any course you can go only step by step. Like, I'm teaching you a first course in computer programming. If you ask me, how does that compiler change this code into machine code? अभी रुको ना थोड़ा, वो compiler construction में final year engineering में आता है. अभी थोड़ी मैं बता सकता हूँ. Time लगेगा उसको. So anything develops gradually. Okay. Yeah. Just that because most of these things connect to our personal lives, perhaps people have more questions general. But perhaps when we study computer programming, we know that, इसका सब कुछ तो आंसर है, कभी तो कोई बताएगा पढ़ने का, तभी पढ़ लेने का. Okay, let's go ahead. Yeah. Attention. All of you know what attention means. So I think it's more easy to be attentive. Yeah. So the last part which I want to talk of is the 5 koshas. It's a very brief definition that I'm going to use today, but this will come repeatedly in our course as we go ahead. Kosha basically in Sanskrit means sheath. Sheath means just like you have a sword in a sheath. This term is called as kosha. And we talk about happiness. The Upanishads generally talk about happiness at 5 levels. Okay, at the first level, it talks of purely in physical terms, which is called as, which is called as Annamaya Kosha. Anna basically literally means, it's not Anna by the way, I'm sorry for that, but it's very difficult, I'm using a Sanskrit word in Roman language. Annamaya basically means external and physical. I mean the first level of happiness and pleasure that everyone seeks is the external physical stuff. This Anna includes not only food, but any input through the senses, which we are looking for as pleasure. The second is called as Pranamaya. So Prana basically means life air, literally. And when I come to yoga, I'll be explaining this more. In fact, this 5, I'm only introducing to you today. So I'll not take questions only on this part, because I will have to elaborate more, which will come 2 sessions down the line, but it's just a definition right now. Life air means, I'll tell you what, in simple terms, just like when you, I'm sure all of you have heard of yoga classes, and in yoga classes there are 2 things they mainly teach. One is called asana and one is called pranayam. Asana is for the body and pranayam is for the mind. The idea is that as per yogic and Sankhya philosophy, the interface between the body and the mind is the life air. That means the breathing process is the interface between your body and your mind. So I can give a simple example of how it happens. Just like all of us know that when we are agitated in mind, our breath changes. The rapidity, the pace of our breath changes. You understood? When one is excited, it changes. When it is calm, it changes. So depending on your mind, your breath is. So pranayam is a system where you regulate the mind. But how do you regulate the mind? How do you catch the mind? By regulating the breath. So that's the thinking behind it. That's the philosophy behind it. That's what I'm introducing to you today. That's why after the physical, the next layer or the sheath covering is the life air, which is the prana. The third is the mana or the mind. The third is the mana or the mind. And the mind is the domain where we experience emotions. So again, many people have been asking me what the hell the mind is. Where you experience your emotions. That substance is the mind. The relationships, you know, all this stuff is part of the mind only. Okay? The mind is the feeling, the relationships, the experiences, the emotions. That entity that experiences all that. And then is, after Manomaya is what is called as Vijnanamaya. Vijnana basically means the rational. So that means after the mind is the intelligence, where one wants to rationally understand everything. So rationality is considered in that way superior to emotions. You understood? Like emotionally one can, like, I mean, I'll just give a personal experience. Recently my cousin, my cousin sister, she's a, you know, postgraduate in computer science. But she actually ran away with the neighboring kid who was a 6th standard fail who makes juice in a hotel. So for the entire family, it was like a shock. Like we were wondering, you wanted to run away, that's fine, but whom did you choose to run away? Any logic or rationality in it? You know, you're a postgraduate in computer science, you have a very good job, career, this, that ahead. You chose someone who is and of course, besides, I mean, we have nothing against those who make juice, but you know, somebody who's totally uneducated, who comes from that kind of a family background, everything, it was a shock for the entire family. But the whole problem is what? That when you're emotional, your rationality doesn't work. That's how it is. That's how life is. So we have all assured her, we are very sure after 2-3 years, you know, something, this is not going to work, you're going to come back. Because it's just not practical. It doesn't make any rational sense. Right? That's how it is. That's how life is. So when a person is too emotional, the rationality fails to work. Like for example, why nowadays, you know, in entire India, there is a lot of drug addiction issue currently being addressed. If you're aware, like for example, the Punjab elections that are going to happen very soon, the whole theme is drugs, because there are millions of Punjabi youth who are addicted to drugs. And even in Pune, it's gone up in recent times so much that you'll not believe that in so many places in Pune, they have put up posters, the Pune police, talking about drugs and all that. And as a dean and a head of department, I have had so many cases where students came to me who were, drug addicts in college and, you know, who were repeatedly failing and their parents were, I mean, they removed them out of college and all that. So basically the whole question is it rational to do it? It's not. But why do you do it? Because you're just overcome by emotion, a wanting of quick experience. So rationality is generally considered above emotion. And that is Vijnanamaya, where you think deeply, where you philosophize before making any decision. Why should I do this? Why should I do this in the world? Why am I going to do this? I mean, why, for example, why should I choose engineering stream? Was it an emotional decision or a rational decision? That's something that all of us have to ask us. At least sometime we will ask ourselves this question. Right? Emotional experience means what? Neighbor said, my best friend is also going. I also went. Socha hi nahi kabhi. It's just carried away by emotion. So rationality is considered superior. Right? So that's called as Vijnanamaya, where you use your intelligence and kind of do things. And the fifth is called Anandamaya. This is again related to the soul. That means it's related to spiritual happiness, which I'm going to talk much later. So the whole idea is that as you go down, as you go here, as you go higher in this hierarchy, the quantum of pleasure experienced is higher. You understood it? That means at the physical level, happiness is considered the most brief. You understand? Like if I like gulab jamun and I'm eating a gulab jamun, only when it is on my tongue there is pleasure. Once it's past the throat, it's not going in my belly and, you know, kind of giving good signals. You know, it's like melting inside, giving you special pleasure. No, it's only the tongue. You understood? So physical is always the brief. Mental, the emotional happiness is higher. If somebody is in a very good positive relationship with someone, the pleasure that you get in that relationship is superior to just plain food and music, which is more external. Whereas rationality and thought process gives phenomenal happiness. Why do you think philosophers all over the world since the time of Socrates, Plato, Pythagoras, they enjoyed thinking deeply on why things work in a particular way? Because that gives even more pleasure than just the emotional stuff. And even higher than that is considered the level of Ananda, which we'll talk on later. So these 5 questions are an introduction just to tell you that, you know, what the mind, where the mind is positioned relative to the stuff that we're talking of. So this, I think this example I had used earlier as well, but the same thing. The senses are the external interface. The mind is combining everything together. The intelligence is the driver because it gives the rationality, gives the direction, where to go, and the passenger is considered the Atma. So please remember, the intelligence mind are not different people sitting. So don't get confused. They are just functions. They are functions of the subtle body. वो function को हमने अलग किया है. That's why I had written very clearly. It is the body of functions, the desires. So the mind obviously, if it is controlled, it gives. So I think this is again just a quote from Gita. For a person who has controlled the mind is the best of friends. For one who has failed to do so, his mind is the greatest enemy. So it's a very simple thing that if your mind is relatively under, you know, one's own ability, then it's great. Otherwise, it can make life hell. Okay, just like a knife, it's neither good or bad. It depends on who uses the knife. So of course, uncontrolled mind can do many things. I'll not go into all that, but there are so many things that a mind can do. So there are many things we could talk about mind control in general. I'll just say one last thing and end the story today. So the last thing that we conclude is the example of a tortoise. So just look at this word, tortoise. So this example is used in Sankhya philosophy, and also Gita uses it in order to convey the theme of how one deals with the mind. So Krishna gives the example of Gita in his Sankhya exposition, saying that just like a tortoise, if you have observed a tortoise, do you know how a tortoise protects itself from its enemies? By withdrawing, right? The shell of the tortoise is considered solid, but the 4 limbs and the head is very soft. So whenever a dangerous situation comes, a tiger comes, some animal comes, it withdraws the legs and the head, and that's it. And nobody can do anything to it. So the whole point, the example in Sankhya is that when there are situations that are actually going to put us in trouble, the mind must not pay attention to that. The mind has to withdraw itself from it. If the mind pays attention to something that you are not supposed to pay attention to, just by paying attention to anything, one is dragged in that direction. That's the power of the mind. I mean, the power of the mind is that if you, focus yourself on something, right? You want to try something out, then your mind just drags you to that, and then there's no coming back, because then one gets attached to it, because then that's a habit, that's a different thing totally, where the mind is completely, lost as a slave to some particular addiction, and one is completely lost. Yeah, makes sense? So that's the tortoise. So I think at this point we end today's day, and we may just take a couple more questions and end the show. So any more questions? Yeah. So the mic comes here. Anybody else who never asked anything? Or some people are only thinking when the class will get over? Okay, just in case. Yeah.
Nature gives whatever we desire. Then theory of evolution can be true. Theory of evolution can be true. I desire it to grow my neck longer. Then I can. Then nature will give me that.
Yeah, very good point.
Theory of evolution may be true.
Yeah, theory of evolution is true, because even in the Vedic system there is an understanding of evolution that is different from Darwinian evolution though. Darwinian evolution is that when I want a long neck, I get long neck by jumping or by external world. The Indian philosophical idea of evolution hai yahan par. The idea of evolution is that the soul evolves in different bodies as per desires, and all these bodies are connected by a chain of desires. So the evolution is subtle, not gross. You understood? So evolution is being spoken of here also, but in a totally different context, not in the Darwinian model. That's a different thing to be dealt with. You can't mix the two, right? Any other question or comment? Yeah, okay. He has never asked anything. So. Yes.
Sir, if a person is born with a defect, then
with a
defect.
Defect, yeah.
Then it's not a desire, right? Of that, how does it?
Brilliant. Okay. So that's why. So this actually helps me go on to my next session, where if you remember, I had mentioned briefly though that our next situation is actually a function of two attributes. I mentioned only one attribute very strongly today, and that attribute is desire. There is also another attribute which I never touched on today, but that comes in the Karma Mimamsa philosophy, which will come another 4 sessions down the line, which is we talk about deserving. Okay, so please remember, it's not, desire is one entity, one component to who you would be. But there is also in terms of what one deserves to obtain or get. We will talk about that a little later. So, yeah, I think I had mentioned that already when somebody asked a question. Thanks for that. Any other quick question or comment? Yeah, behind.
So you said that we should not concentrate or focus on things which are not good or means dangerous for us.
Yeah.
Just like you said tortoise and that tiger example.
Yeah.
So if we don't concentrate or focus, so how can we avoid them then?
No. When I said concentrate or focus, as in concentrate or focus with an idea of experience. With an idea of wanting to experience. I'll just say something for which I have to off this.